Start. Hi everyone, and welcome in today's webinar. My name is Fationa Meidini, and I'm the director of the Global Initiative Observatory of Illicit Economies in Southeastern Europe. Today, we are gathered here to present the main findings and conclusions from our latest reports titled Organized Corruption, Political Financing in the Western Balkans. But before doing so, I just want to remind for all the participants that our observatory, in fact, has been established in this region since 2018, during the London summit of the Berlin process, a process that many of you know aims to forge collaboration among 6 Western Balkan countries and facilitate their way toward EU integration. Our observatory, as a result, is present in Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. But we are also conducting research and following illicit financial flows in the neighboring countries such as Slovenia, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece. The key functions of our observatory are research and analysis. We publish a regional research report, that the one that we are going to present today, policy papers and risk bulletins, both when it comes to organized crime and corruption. We also discuss and debate with all the relevant actors, including the government in the region, pushing so for our research to turn into policy. Also, through Global Initiative Resilience Fund, we are continuously supporting local civil society organizations in the region to build resilience against organized crime and corruption. We are really proud to have supported 56 projects so far and really looking forward for more. I really hope that with our work, we are contributing not only to empowerment of civil society in this region, but also to the debate for more transparency and strong public institution. Without further ado, I want now to pass the floor to our senior advisor, Mr. Ugi Zvekic, who is also one of the authors of the report that we are presenting today. Ugi is also going to be the moderator of this webinar today. Ugi, the floor is yours, and thank you so much for being present today.
Thank you, Fationa, for the introduction and giving me the floor. It is indeed my great pleasure to moderate this session, in which, as Fationa pointed out, we are going to present some of the main findings from the new report on organized corruption, political financing in the Western Balkans, which is actually the continuation of our previous publication entitled Infrastructure of Integrity of some 3 years ago, which analyzed corruption and anti-corruption in the Western Balkans 6 and found out something that is well known, and that is the central role of politics, both in fighting and perpetuating corruption. Before I go into more substance, I would like to point out that this report was based on the analytical contributions that came from a number of national experts, and I would like to mention them and thank each of them. From Albania, Professor Fabian Zilja and Professor Andi Hoxha; from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Professor Eldan Mujanovic; from Kosovo, Mentor Vejoli; from Montenegro, Dejan Milovac; from North Macedonia, Slađana Taseva and Marija Sunčevska; and from Serbia, Miodrag Milosavljevic. Then we had the regional coordinators, to whom I will give the floor later on, Professor Sunčana Roksandić from University of Zagreb and Professor Bojan Dobovšek from University of Maribor/Ljubljana. In that previous report, Infrastructure of Integrity, we coined the term organized corruption, trying to explain how corruption is embedded in the political economy of the countries in the region. And it is a term that is particularly evident in the context of countries in transition towards democracy, where an important part of the economy is still in the public domain, as it is the case in the Western Balkans. And in this sense, organized corruption is actually involvement and use of an interest organization. It might be criminal or not, using various forms of corruption-related illicit deeds from the position of power or with political coverage to gain financial, political, or social benefits. In this context, particularly of Western Balkans, control of politics and control of economy are interlinked. Being in power means controlling the strings of the public purse. And therefore, in this report, we have really focused on three main issues, and that is financing of political parties and elections, use of the state-owned or public enterprises, and use of public procurement. So to each of these, we have paid particular attention, and it is now my pleasure to ask my two very close collaborators and regional coordinators, Professor Sučana Roksandić and Professor Bojan Dobovšek. So I will give first the floor to Bojan to tell us a little bit more about financing of political parties and elections. Bojan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guy. I will start where you finished, with the phrase organized corruption ante portas. Because the political financing and elections, they open the doors for organized corruption. Politicians need money for elections, to win the elections, but the donors, they expect favors to be returned later after they are elected. So they return the favors through positions on the state-owned companies or on the public procurement. What are the general remarks on our research data? First of all, we need harmonized legislation with the European Union and other standards, but that implementation was done, but the implementation is the problem in practice. The problem is also distinguished between formal and informal financing. Formal financing is usually okay. Of course, there are problems, but informal financing is the problem because of the private funds, also the gray area of NGOs, financing from abroad, and other things. So informal financing on the elections is bigger problem, again, with the formal problems of implementation. Sanctions are problematic, and in analyzed countries, the problem is that there are no sanctions, or the sanctions have no effect. So the fines are very low, and the problem is how to collect the money. And of course, last but not least, we can expose the role of the media. The role of the media is very problematic because who has access to the media, the person can win the election. So the privatizing the media or pressure on the state-owned media. That is the biggest problem in the whole area. So what we can conclude from our research, you can find all the data and cooperation between all of the countries in the annex of our document, which is very important. There is a table at the end, and here you can compare the data between the countries. And then you can go, of course, on the document and see the details and how are the countries different. So first of all, the Western Balkans 6 is in search of the culture of the political integrity. That is the basic, because in the region, we all do in the Balkan way. So, of course, we have laws, but we do not implement them, and we not do according to the laws. So that is the first problem. The second problem is that the public servant and the politicians do not act transparently, accountably, and responsible to the society. So they must change the attitude to the corruption. And of course, the third thing, the oversight, but that is not only problem. The problem is who appoint the directors, functionaries, and others. Who is in power can appoint on those institutions, and those institutions cannot then fight against the politicians who appointed them. Of course, there is a few things which are good, not at least, let's say, we have some media, some independent media, especially what is important are the social media, which are gaining power, controlling the state institutions, and of course, politicians and financing the political parties, and of course, then the elections. Then what can we expose also? Then academia could do more, but at the end, every individual can do more. The problem is the role of the parliament also. The parliament is losing power because the parliament is captured by the executive branch in power. So those who are leading the state and who are behind, that is organized corruption, who is behind is controlling course of the parliament. So we must give the power to the parliament, the power to the people, but everyone should act as a transparent, accountable, and responsible citizen, and also when he or she was elected, also be against corruption. Since we are in the digital age, which is exposed also in the other documents of Global Initiative, the new reporting system, which is transparent, interactive, friendly to use, and easy to monitor, is proposed. So the creation of the platform is the fight against financial crime and how to control those who are on the position or who stay behind those who are on the position. So that's what we propose. So bear in mind that read also the proposals for those countries. What should every individual or whoever is fighting against organized corruption do? Of course, more data on the political financing and elections, which explain everything in detail, as you will find in the document, which is the best document ever. And it's the document for the Western Balkans 6, but I think also for the other developed countries in European Union, we should need such a document. So you will find this document and read also the annex and all other issues. And so after the webinar, read the document, share it, and that will be your fight against organized corruption, each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bojan, very much for this expose. And it is my pleasure now to give the floor to Professor Sunčana Roksandić from the Law School, University of Zagreb, and she will deal with two economically related issues. Sunčana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ugi. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming. I just want to emphasize that in our first report concerning infrastructure of integrity, we were able to detect issues that are very pressing in Western Balkans 6. And with this publication, we addressed important issues. You heard about Bojan concerning political financing. I will tell you briefly some of our main findings concerning state-owned or public-owned enterprises and public procurement. Can we see the slide? It will be easier maybe to follow. The next one, please. Thank you. So concerning challenges related to legislation, control, and oversight of state-owned enterprises, we were able to identify some issues which are common to all Western Balkan 6 countries. But before mentioning them, I just want to emphasize, like in any country, state-owned enterprises are particularly important for economic security, because energy, water, railroads, waste management, different infrastructure, forestry, those are all sectors which the state still has many state-owned or publicly owned enterprises alongside municipalities. So what we were able to detect that concerning legislation, like in other sectors, the countries which want to join the EU are quite doing very well, except some of them who have setbacks concerning the provisions in the legislation itself. But what we are able to identify is that consistent shortcomings in the implementation are very present, especially concerning insufficient oversight from relevant control bodies that are applicable for state-owned enterprises. And that is happening in spite of several repeated recommendations that are given to particular countries and in reports of progress in joining EU. Particular emphasis is given to lack of independence in some cases and effectiveness of bodies which were established as independent. One of the issues which is quite maybe even striking in some cases, given the importance of state-owned enterprises and their economic role, is that sometimes the selection of best professionals is not taking place for different roles in state-owned enterprises. And some of those roles are really dependent of political appointments and of course then dismissals, but it's not only characteristics of key employees, but also of the middle management and other employees. We had even some of the examples of the countries which you can read in our country reports, where we also the lottery was also organized to have some of the employment in state-owned enterprises, particularly when when the elections are approaching. And the other issue that we were able to identify is lack of transparency. That lack of transparency is vivid not only in operations and appointments, but also in the reporting of the achieved results. For instance, in some cases, we even have ignoring of the obligation to report and make all the available data to wider public. And what is worrisome as well is the lack of public accountability. Sometimes political interest really does come first and not business interest, which leads in some cases even to massive debts of the companies that otherwise would be business-wise very successful. We can continue with another slide. And that is definitely connected to the lack of maybe appointing the best possible experts in the relevant positions, and taking into account that state-owned enterprises and publicly owned enterprises are one of the largest employers in Western Balkans and providers definitely of job security in the region. That means that political party and its leadership, the party that won elections or is participating in the government, sometimes uses those publicly owned enterprises or state-owned enterprises as election prey or ATMs of the ruling parties. By that, buying social peace and assuring political trust is gained, and that has reflections to the first component that we also did to political elections, because in the cases when this modus operandi is present, we have solid voters base for upcoming elections. And in some cases that we also described in our detailed report, resources from state-owned enterprises are not used to enhance the business and actually help and develop economic security in each state and in the region, but used to finance pre-election activities and political campaigns. What we also noticed, and this will be part of our next research, is that we have, based on the findings that we got, rather rare use of judicial actions against top management, although in each of Western Balkan countries there are such cases. Next slide, please. So common characteristics of state-owned enterprises in Western Balkan is that, but I have to emphasize it's not only in Western Balkan, is that by controlling state-owned enterprises, there is access to public resources and strategic sectors. That leads to another area that we research, sometimes signing of unfavorable contracts, which are not used to, again, enhance business and economic security. What leads at the end with problems with liquidity that in different cases should or would be definitely avoided. Overemployment is also sometimes present with, in some cases, overly favorable salaries, heavily influenced by politics and nepotism. That also leads to duplication of positions and irregular promotions. What we underline in our report, and it is connected to already established research, that no sufficient verification of the conflict of interest exists, and overall lack, not in all cases, but lacking the culture of integrity that should be enhanced. We can continue. That all reflects, of course, political use and control over public procurement, because the overall analysis of the findings that we got definitely involves the research of state-owned enterprises, political financing, and use of public procurement processes. We can continue. So when we are talking about legislative changes in area connected with public procurement, definitely we can say maybe even more than with state-owned enterprises, that the process of legislative changes and bringing bylaws in this area is linked to acquis communautaire of European Union and the desire of Western Balkan countries to join EU, and regularly the legislation is updated in accordance with relevant directives, and many countries do also have whistleblowing protection more in line with EU directives. But public procurement in general is exposed everywhere, especially in the region, definitely to corruption. And amendments of laws are ongoing to reducing the risks of corruption, improving transparency and integrity. But EU standards and values are not only reflected in the law itself as it is written, but also in implementation on the law. And in public procurement, we have to underline that it is still ongoing process. In some cases, like example of Serbia, in some particular areas, we even have reverse process in legislation where NGO sector is not that present in legislation itself as oversight body. So definitely there is a need of constant in-depth corruption proofing in this area, but in each stage of the process, because in public procurement, there are many stages where corruption risks can rise. We can continue. And common characteristics of public procurement analysis that we did for each Western Balkan country is definitely expedited negotiations and conclusions of contracts lacking public, transparent, fair, and competitive processes. Not, of course, in every situation, but in general, we can conclude that we were able to observe it. Sometimes legislative exemptions from regular procedure are maybe even more present than it is advisable. And that also reflects that tender value that is given is known to the bidders beforehand and before concluding the contract. A number of bidders is rather low, and sometimes we can see it that almost monopolistic positions do exist in certain economic sectors, and favoring certain foreign investors is also present in each Western Balkan country. Absence of reporting of irregularities is also vivid. And as again with regulation concerning some of the aspects of business of state-owned enterprises, there is no sufficient verification of the conflict of interest in each particular case where that could be expected. Definitely, together with state-owned enterprises regulation and appointments there, we can say that together with public procurement, we have here an instrument of foreign policy and a way of bolstering wealth and power. And you can see many examples of our rather strong conclusion in the detailed report. And all of that definitely leads to the concept of organized corruption, not in every case and not in every Western Balkan country, in every sector, but definitely elements of organized corruption in different stages of public procurement could be seen. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sunčana. So now, thanks to Bojan and Sunčana, we have, I think, had an overall impression about what are some of the main issues regarding financing of political parties, elections, some of the main issues regarding the use and misuse of state-owned public enterprises and public procurement. So really, at the end of this, I don't have much to say except to repeat or point out just few things regarding the challenges that we are in the region facing. Already, I think it was quite well understood both from Bojan's and Sunčana's expose that there are certain challenges in legislation, in a sense that most of the legislation regarding financing of political parties or regulation of state-owned enterprises, and in particular public procurement, is very much up to the EU and other international standards, but that there have been also trends noted either for a reverse order, that is stepping outside of the previously acquired standards, or in particular trying to find out legalized loopholes in the legislation, which would allow for the promotion of particular political or economic interests. And this search and installation of loopholes in the legislation is part of organized corruption. These are not illegal acts. These are purely legal acts, but that fall into the strategy of trying to find the best way to achieve certain gains at the less cost and risk without being exposed to being far away from the European Union or international standards. So indeed, as mentioned, I think we need to pay much more attention to the procedure known as corruption or organized crime legislation proofing in the future. I think it was also mentioned very much, particularly by Bojan and then later on by Sunčana, that one of the problems of the implementation or lack of implementation of a number of legislative pieces in all these three related areas is actually either lack of control and oversight or no respect to the recommendations or decisions of already existing oversight bodies. These might be state revision, audit commissions that have made a number of recommendations and decisions which are just not respected. They are not implemented. That is one of the problems. Another problem is that in a number of cases in the Western Balkans 6, the oversight and control mechanisms are themselves politicized. In other words, they are also membership in these oversight mechanisms is also very much politically colored. So maybe they don't have sufficiently independent status and role as it would be expected. I think it was also noted through our legislation that there is a lack of a very important general oversight mechanism, and that is of the Parliament. Parliament, among other things, exists to control and oversight legislation itself, so passing on the legislation because it is a legislative body, and also carrying out the oversight over the implementation of the legislation that it has passed. And the general impression is that in the Western Balkans 6, this oversight role of the Parliament has not been sufficiently highlighted. Another thing that probably is not sufficiently institutionalized is the role of the civil society, media, academic community in the oversight. It is very important that media, civil society, and academia carry out control, and many of them do it. But the question is how much attention is being paid by the political and economic structures to the analysis carried out by civil society, academia, or media in order to better the situation and to avoid the problems that we are facing with it. I think we already talked about the challenges of implementation, which are probably the most important ones. We have to recognize that there is a sort of lack of independence also in the process of implementation itself. For example, we can also see that part of the, for example, electoral marketing campaign often consists in opening or initiating public construction works and infrastructure such as roads, bridges, railways, fast trains, shopping centers, factories, and the like, which are financed from the state budget, but are then put in the function of achieving the electoral advantage in the parties in power. I think we also have to note that in the implementation of legislation, not sufficient attention, in addition to what Bojan mentioned about media, is paid to the public opinion survey companies, which can greatly influence public preferences. And indeed, some political parties have their own survey companies, others contract specialized opinion survey companies. Both should be based on transparent financing of such activities, but also there is a sort of specific favorable targeting of the results needs, and these all needs particular scrutiny. I think that in terms of implementation, but also legislation, we also need to be aware of the role of organized crime. In the infrastructure of integrity, we have analyzed the role of organized crime. And I think also here we have to face this challenge. The organized crime, which is today becoming more and more part of the legitimate economic, in particular, structure, is also exercising certain political influences through donations, for example, as Bojan has mentioned, or through being placed in a favorable position in awarding public procurement contracts. Also, it has been noted that in some cases, some hidden members of the organized crime groups or their families have been also placed on the electoral lists, and some of them could have been also elected to carry out public functions. Sunčana has in particular talked about challenges regarding management and employment opportunities because of the particular economic profile of the Balkan 6, in which still state-controlled economy plays an important role. And we have noted that the big challenge of that is to avoid politicized management. This, unfortunately, is a rule. It is not an exception to the rule that state-owned enterprises, public enterprises, are usually managed by people who are loyal to the ruling political parties. And if the ruling political parties change, there is a tendency to bring a new management structure that would be loyal to the new political parties or political party in power. That regards, I would say, both top-level management, but also middle-level management, which depends in turn on the top-level management and therefore has to exercise quite a high level of loyalty, which means that the role of management, which is to look over on its own over the possible cases of deviance or the possible cases of misuse of public funds or the possible cases of corruption, is very much reduced because of this high-level dependency of middle-level management towards the top-level management. Finally, as Sunčana mentioned, because of the economic policy of our countries and the structure in which the state is still a big employer, number of employees which have certain benefits, particularly in terms of job security, are also required almost to show the level of loyalty to the political parties that are in power. These are, of course, very serious challenges, and this represents or symbolizes what we have called buying of the social support, which is an important component of the organized corruption concept that we have been dealing with. Finally, I would like to say that it is, of course, very important to note that all of these countries have shown progress in the fight against corruption and organized crime as well, but with many, many challenges, and a lot of reforms have to be carried out, particularly regarding the construction and proper existence of the culture of integrity, political culture of integrity, both of which Bojan and Sunčana have referred to. And this culture of integrity, from both of integrity of infrastructure of integrity publication and this one on organized corruption, are really dependent very much, I would say, on two distinct layers. One is the layer of the political parties themselves. So without proper, honest political culture of the political parties, we cannot expect to have the culture of integrity in the society in which the role of political parties, particularly the role of political parties in the economy, is as strong as it is in the Western Balkans 6. So therefore, the first layer are political parties and what needs to be done about them. I think this was one of the main issues that we have analyzed in this report that we are presenting now to you. The second one is, of course, the role of the institutions that exist there to fight against organized crime, to prevent organized crime, to prevent corruption, and therefore the integrity of the institutions is of utmost importance in bringing up this culture of integrity. This is our actually next project, which we have just launched last month, and I would like to ask our younger colleague, Mr. Yanis Vlasis, to tell us a few words about the new project that we are going to get engaged in. Yanis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And hello to everyone, and a very big thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. As Ugi mentioned, my name is Yanis Vlasis, and I've been working as an analyst at GI for a little over a year, splitting my time between our observatory covering Southeastern Europe with a particular focus on anti-corruption work and working on the global strategy against transnational organized crime. I'm excited to introduce phase 6 of our anti-corruption work in the Balkans, which will look at, as you will see on the slide, how corruption interacts with key institutional pillars in the space of criminal justice. And for this, we will focus on 4 main sectors: police, prosecution, judiciary, and specialized anti-corruption agencies. As we all know, these sectors are at the front line. They're battling corruption every day, but in many ways, they are also, unfortunately, also facilitating corruption. We are going to divide our research into 4 parts, one for each sector, and in each part, we'll be looking at how these institutions are structured according to their respective legislative frameworks. Furthermore, we will look at how staff are selected, nominated, and appointed in these sectors and what mandates they have, with a strong focus on, where applicable, the academies that educate and train future staff. We will also look at and analyze all the specialized units and departments that are specifically tasked with dealing with corruption and organized crime. And moreover, we will look at what kind of oversight and control is in place, both from within the institutions and from the outside. Furthermore, we will also analyze how corruption has made its way into these sectors and the connections to organized crime. And lastly, how these institutions are handling information security challenges. In conclusion, we believe that trust in these institutions is a key condition for achieving a culture of integrity and an effective fight against organized corruption. And through this project, we aim to help the Western Balkan 6 countries strengthen their efforts against corruption and to help foster a culture of transparency, accountability, and respect for the rule of law. Many thanks for your time, and it is now my absolute pleasure to give the floor to Professor Dimitris Zuvas, Director of the Center for Criminal Sciences of Pantheon University of Athens.
Thank you very much, Ioannis, and I would like to extend my gratitude for this invitation to the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and of course to our good friend, Ambassador Ugi Svekic, for coordinating this project. It was a pleasure and an honor to read this report produced by GI-TOC. As a lawyer and also as a politician since yesterday, because for the first time I was a candidate for the Greek Hellenic Parliament, I would like to say that this is really a groundbreaking report. From a methodological point of view, because it is comparative. There is little research out there that focuses on these 6 Western Balkan states: Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. So this is the first very important advantage of this report. The second and even more important advantage of this report is its holistic approach, ladies and gentlemen. When we discuss corruption, it is very clear that paying a bribe or receiving a bribe in most countries under research is a crime. But when we discuss organized corruption with regard to political financing, we are actually fishing in a gray area. So it is very difficult to catch these corrupt fish. And this corrupt fish is big fish. So we're not referring anymore to petty corruption, we're referring to grand corruption, and it's also organized and systemic because it has been going on and on for decades. And it is very important, and I think this is a great achievement of this report, that this report combines three sectors: political financing of political parties as such, and we all know that both the European Union and other European institutions and organizations like the Council of Europe have international standards for financing of political parties. So this is the first part. Reporting and disclosure of funding is very important. It is key to maintain democracy in the Western Balkans. So this goes without saying. But then, if we leave this direct funding of politics aside, we come to indirect ways of influence, state-owned enterprises being the first sector, which is very, very important because we have a lot of state-owned enterprises in this part of the world. And in the way, if joining the European Union is a process, we will expect that some of those state-owned enterprises will be privatized. And this will be another very hot sector for fighting corruption. So this is the second part, because these state-owned enterprises are employers, because these state-owned enterprises are big spenders in terms of advertisement, big spenders in terms of social responsibility projects within those enterprises. And then comes public procurement, which is the third sector. And this is, of course, very important because we all know in our region that political friends, the so-called oligarchs, enjoy the favor of the ruling political parties. And it goes without saying that their political friends, the ones who are in power of politics, assist and help their good friends, the oligarchs, to win bids and to enter public procurement contracts. And this leads to monopolies, this leads to oligopolies in many, many sectors. One can think of the defense expenditure, the health sector is very important. We had to make this conclusion during the COVID crisis as well. And of course, public works, which is very important because infrastructure in the Western Balkans 6 under research needs to be brought to a higher level in order to meet European Union standards, European Union standards of safety of roads, of safety of railway, of safety of transportation, and so on. So I think it is for the first time that such a report has such a holistic view, and it also adapts the big picture approach. So this is very important. So we're not looking only at those small three pieces of the puzzle, but we bring with this report the three pieces together, and we can see the big picture. And the big picture is a picture where politicians and political parties try to control media. They try to control and exercise political influence. And of course, media is not a business which is easily profitable as such, like owning a TV station or a newspaper. So someone has to fund all this media business. And the ones who fund it, these people who are involved in public procurement in most cases, expect something in return. So there is a do ut des, as the Latin used to say, a give and take all the time in our region. And I think it is very important that this report points a finger at this give and take, which takes place constantly. And it also highlights the legal frameworks of these 6 countries.
Do we have an interruption? Hello? Hello?
I can hear you, Yogi. I don't know what is going on with.
Well, there is Dimitris that we cannot hear, or anyone else. Hello, Claudio?
Yes, just Dimitri.
Okay, just Dimitri. Okay. Is there any way to put him back? Oh.
I will put him back when he joins. You can maybe read a few questions.
Okay, yes, sure. No, I think this was also very, very good presentation from Dimitri. So I thank him, though he doesn't hear me now, because I believe also from what Dimitris has pointed out, the issue of financing of political parties' elections, the use of state-owned public enterprises in particular as a political prey, is not so specific to the Western Balkans. We also see it in other parts of the world, and including in the European Union. So that is not something that is very specific to Western Balkans, but it is, of course, maybe a little bit more important in Western Balkans because of the still very much state-skewed public economy. But these are the issues that are not at all aligned from those that our colleagues living in European Union countries or in other parts of the world are not facing. I would like also to draw your attention that we have two questions and one hand that was raised and that would like to participate. So let me just say that our good friend of ours, Tari Kossa, is asking, as the parliamentarians are captured by the executive, do you think an effective judicial oversight is needed? This is from Tari Kossa from Pakistan. Boyan or Sunchana, would you like to answer this?
I can answer this. So judicial branch and power is important, control everything, especially the courts, but that is not the role of the parliament, and they cannot control the parliament. They can control the laws. Who's producing the laws? Where are the laws written? So that is the problem. The laws are written outside the parliament. So those influential groups are writing the laws and push it through the parliament because the leaders of the parties are in the executive branch and power, and they say for which law should the parliamentarians vote. So the only answer is to control the assets, the money, and everything of the functionaries. Functionaries are, of course, ministers, parliamentarians, judges, prosecutors, mayors, and others. So follow the money, control the assets, control the money is the first answer. The function of the court is only to judge. So they should say this or that law is against the constitution. So in whole world, especially in the Balkan area, the most important thing is who will be elected to the constitutional court, and that is the role of the parliament, whom to elect. The person, from my experience, it's important that the constitutional judge should be someone who's in front of the retirement because he's the end of career, and we should monitor his career, because if we elect the young judge, he or she should be later on another position, and it's easy to influence on that. So if the judge is old and at the end of career, he should step down and say in the media what is wrong or who is pushing him or which group. So controlling the money and elect the person who is clear on corruption in his background. So that is the answer.
Thank you, Boyan. I see that Dimitris has joined us. Would you like to bring to the end your otherwise very interesting conclusion? Please,
Yes,
Dimitris.
thank you. Thank you, Guy. The fact that my intervention was suspiciously interrupted makes me so I have to excuse myself. I have a bad connection, and I will try to finish my brief presentation within the next 2 or 3 minutes to avoid another interruption. What I would like to stress are a few keywords. Keyword one is lobbying. There is an EU-wide lobbying framework, and this is very important for the Western Balkan 6 to take into account. I think it is very important as well that this report focuses on social media campaigning and advertising, because this is where big money, dark money, and gray money is being paid today for political financing. So much advertisement is done online through Facebook, through Twitter, and through other channels. And this is something that normally goes under the radar of reporting and monitoring. So this is very important that the report focuses on this issue. And the other issue that also Ugi touched upon are public opinion surveys. Public opinion surveys are
Well, it looks like we have a problem with Dimitris since he became politician. Somebody is cutting him all the time. So we'll continue with that. There is another interesting question from Professor J. Albanese, who is also the president of the Criminologists Without Border, in which he states actually what we have noted, that many challenges that we refer to are common to other countries, including in Western Europe and North America, that in many cases it appears that political or business self-interest, personal or business gain, take precedence over the interests of civil society and the country as a whole. And his question is, does our report offer other insights regarding how to change the underlying individual and personal self-serving political and business interests that drive corrupt actions, rather than serving the interests of civil society, that is to improve integrity at the personal level? So since both Boyan and Sunčana are involved in education, and I believe that education is one of the very important avenues to address the challenge that Jay has posed to us, I would like to give the floor to Sunčana maybe for a few comments on this. Hello, Sunčana.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
Please.
you. I was not able to hear completely the question, but I heard you mentioning education in this area. And I think that all the publication of global initiative concerning the findings of infrastructure of integrity, of political financing, and stage 6, as Ioannis was very clearly describing us, is something that should gain momentum in education material and definitely be used in order to address the shortcomings and in order to address the risk of corruption that are ongoing. But also, this is good example for all transitional countries, and I will and here especially it will be a good example for Ukraine in the future and for the countries that are now passing conflict, and to see what elements should be fulfilled and where the potential risks in this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think now I will ask Claudio, can you please give the floor to Eduardo Vettere, who asked to take the floor?
Sure.
Eduardo, are you hooked on?
Yes, I am still hooked on.
Please, then the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to congratulate you, Ugi, as a main presenter, but also all your colleagues, as well as all the professors who have been involved in the 6 countries. Very, very, very important comprehensive study, which gives not only a picture of the existing situation, but also looks at the challenges and how to confront and how to face them. Now, particularly in connection with the question of political and party financing, it is a pity that the glorious father of Ioannis is not here with us any longer, because I think that he could really, as a secretary of the negotiating committee of UNCAC, he could be probably much more, first of all, both in terms of memory and in terms of details, much better than me, in saying that the question of political financing as related to corruption was felt as a very, very strong point, and as an offense to be included autonomously in the convention. And this was discussed more or less, was present from the very beginning of the negotiations, as well in the several proposals made by the countries which submitted even the full text of the draft convention at the beginning. However, during the negotiations, which were concluded exactly at the end with a lot of debate, for whatever reasons, it disappeared as a corruption offense, and was not included together with the other, but it was somewhat hidden in what is now Article 7 of the convention, which is on the public sector. Particularly, I wish to call the attention of the participants to paragraph 2 and 3 of Article 7, which refers exactly to the question of candidature and election of public officials and possibility of corruptions on that. Of course, as far as procurement is concerned, there is Article 9 of UNCAC, which relates to quite a number of very important provisions related to public procurement. Now, however, the relations between public procurement, financing of political party, and all the rest that has been highlighted in the report is tremendously important, and probably important not just for the 6 countries, the Balkan countries, in connection also with their let's say, desire for entering in the European Union, but is important also for many other countries who are already members of the European Union, which in one way or another lack some of the basic things related to the proper implementation of the existing legal provision. Questa implementation is essential, and a lot of more attention should be paid exactly on this. For this reason, I think that is tremendously important. Also, the further follow-up, for the next studies, as outlined by Johannes, is extremely well to focus on the institutions we have mentioned, but probably in order to, in a sense, try to suggest more and more possible measures that can be appropriate, but especially in order to increase and to strengthen the cultural integrity. In addition to those institutions, probably I will also look at the role of academia, university, and in general, educational institution in trying to transmit and in order to have, starting from the younger generation, much more, in a sense, inclined to follow and implement the rules rather than breaking them for a real cultural legality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eduardo, who was for a long time very high-level official at the United Nations and knows a lot of efforts that the United Nations have been putting in trying to promote international standards against organized crime and corruption. And therefore, they do make parameters for the legislation and particularly implementation when it comes also to Western Balkan countries. I see that we have still 2-3 questions here. And let me say that one question, I'm afraid, is very specific about Serbia, and that is, have you considered support given to religious authorities in exchange for political support, like yesterday's decision of the government of Serbia to spend additional 4 million euros on construction of the St. Sava temple in Belgrade, tax exemptions or a permit to build luxury apartments for sale in Novi Beograd. This is part of Belgrade. This is very specific, of course, a question that regards Serbia. I am not able to get into these details, but I think you know that we do have a problem in number of, not in all countries, but in some countries, of 2 things. One is a very elementary issue of any democracy, and that is division of powers between executive, legislative, and judicial. And in some of the countries, because of these interlinkages, including also economy, such a division of power does not exist or is not respected. This partially applies also to religious authorities, which in some countries might have much more influence than one would expect, and where certain boundaries between state and religious authorities, particularly those that belong to the majority, are not always very clear. The second question is that man makes the laws. Yeah, generally the organized corruption inside a state level institutions, government, parliaments, law, is not a huge issue or bring a great concern for the everyday life for the regular citizens. Which possible solutions could we think about for this situation? How to catch the attention of population to this very important issue? Bojana, I would like you, as the member, previous member of the one of the first anti-corruption agencies in Southeastern European region, the Slovenian one, maybe to address this question. Please.
Thank you. First of all, there is education, but we should start in the primary school and also in the faculties. We do not have the faculties lectures on corruption usually. Then the media, how to reach the media to expose this issue. Let's say a few years ago in the European Parliament, the Green Party had a report on the cost of corruption. We should present the people the cost of corruption. The cost of corruption average for European Union countries is 1/4 of the budget. So this is a huge amount. For this money, we could have better social security, better health security, cheap or even schools better or whatever. So we should present to the people what are the costs of corruption, and they cannot get the job because all the jobs were done through the connections, through the friendly use or through other things. So that should be present to the people, to elect the honest people to the parliament, because we saw only the parliament can appoint the let's say non-corrupt judges or non-corrupt politicians which are in the executive branch of power. So how we could see how to reach the media through, let's say, academia or through NGOs or through the others. That is the solution. So start with the young generation, start lecturing on corruption in the schools, faculties, and others, and then promote everything in the media, because we found out what is not in the media, it is not appear. So the media has the crucial point, and as you pointed out, Ugi, those agencies are not measuring the public opinion, they are creating the public opinion. So the control of public opinion agencies is very, very important.
Thank you, Bojan. I have a question which I think fits well into what Sunčana is teaching actually at the Faculty of Law, an innovative course in the Faculty of Law in Zagreb. And Sunčana, the question is, how do you assess the role of the private sector? What opportunities do you see for private companies to contribute to greater transparency and accountability of political funding and the rule of law in the Western Balkans?
Thank you, Ugi, and thank you for the question, because the issues that we were dealing today is definitely interlinked with private sector, and economic offenses as such, of course, are also applying to the private sector, and their role in recognizing where the problem lies, and their role in recognizing sometimes illegal behavior is of great relevance here. As we underline in our report, foreign, but also private, domestic ones and regional ones, companies are present in the problems that we found in the report, and definitely although it might be great opportunity, and it is a economic opportunity to be present in the region, and the region develops also thanking to that, it's important to recognize the behavior that should be avoided, especially in the practices in court proceedings that in the region we already had, but not only in the region Western Balkan, but in Southeastern Europe as well, because challenges connected to transitional countries and countries that want to join EU are really very present in private business, and the companies that are present in the region should be aware of it and adapt their internal regulations accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunčana. We have not really a question, but a comment by. Sorry.
Sorry, I have just raised the hand, and I just want to also contribute a little bit.
I haven't seen it. Sorry.
Yeah.
So please
No
go
worries.
ahead.
No
Please
worries.
go ahead,
No,
Fatjona.
because there are very interesting questions, in fact, and thank you for those. So I just want to touch a little bit upon on the private sector. I think it's a very good question because sometimes what we see in the Western Balkan region is this collusion or the nexus that is created among politics, business, and organized crime. So this is something that we have written about, and this is something very serious. So there's always this tendency that one or two or maybe three businessmen, they are going to be linked with people in power, and as a result, all the public procurement and concessions and everything, they are going to go to them. And so they kind of like are in this kind of symbiotic relationship that they feed each other. And of course, this is really problematic. And I believe there's not an easy answer how to kind of like undo this kind of like symbiotic relationship. But I think what is important is to have the private sector more present in every discussion that we are having when it comes to corruption and transparency. So I think because there are, of course, a part of the private business which is on their best interest, like, I mean, to have transparency, to have rule of law, and so on. So I think it's important for civil society also to create these alliances with the best part of the business, those people that really they want to move forward and to create not only economical opportunities, but also values in their society. And I think that until now, the work of the private sectors has been undermined, and we don't have their voice in this kind of like roundtables and discussion, which I think we should have more in the future. Also, some other thing that I want to also mention is the fact that private sector plays, like, I mean, a very important role when it comes also to illicit financial flows. So which are a very important issue in our region. And sometimes, like, I mean, we just look at the institution, but there are not only institutions, but we have, like, I mean, banks and agencies and companies that they also have to be taken accountable when it comes to issues, let's say, like illicit financial flow. So I just want to mention that very soon, just to expand our work, not only on that anti-corruption and illicit financial flows, we are just also going to have a dedicated report when it comes to the role of private sector in the Western Balkans regarding illicit financial flows. So this was something that I wanted to flag out as well. Thanks, Uge.
Thank you, Fatjona, very much. Very important contribution to our discussion. I have also a comment by a good friend and colleague of ours, Trpe, from North Macedonia. It's a sort of corrigendum. He is telling us that maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea that in addition to challenges that we are talking about, that we also mention what are some of the positive examples in the region that have taken place either in one of the three issues or related arena that we are dealing with. So that, and indeed, it's not that everything that we are talking about is very bleak. There are some positive examples, both in terms of legislation as well of building up the implementation infrastructure. We have in the report itself, we have noted a few of them, calling them like interesting solutions or interesting proposals, which I think is quite right. But I do agree that maybe generally speaking, we need sometimes to pay much more attention to what are the positive trends and not only negative. Somehow when we get engaged, or I myself am very much should be blamed for that, maybe too much emphasis on critical view rather than on emphasizing what positive has been achieved. And I think this, thank you, Trpe, this is a very good observation, and I think something that we should look at more carefully and try to balance, also for the sake of scientific neutrality and scientific objectivity. Are there any other comments that any of the panelists would like to make Or are there any? I don't see any other questions.
I see one hand raised.
Okay.
Can you maybe check it? If it's
I can't check. I don't know who raised the hand, but Claudio, can you check who has raised the hand? I mean, I don't see on my screen who raised the hand. So,
Miss Vera Velkova?
sorry?
I can see Miss Vera Velkova or not anymore. Okay.
No, okay. Okay. Well, I think, we had a very nice discussion also about this very complex topic. We have also outlined what are the intentions for the future to deal with. And I would, of course, like to thank very much to the participants, in particular to Sunchana, Boyan, Yanis, Dimitris, Fatjona, of course, she opened it, to Claudio also for his enabling us to do it well, and also for all those people that have participated either through questions or through taking the floor. So I would like to close it. Fatjona, maybe you have the last word since you are director of the Observer. Oh.
So thank you very much, Ugi. So you thanked us, but I also take the opportunity to thank you for your work and coordinating and organizing this this great webinar. I would say where not just we presented the findings of our report, but it was also an opportunity to exchange some ideas and very useful feedback for our way forward. So summer is usually a very slow season, but a global initiative, and especially when it comes to our observatory in Southeastern Europe, we are having a lot of publication on the pipeline. So follow us and stay in touch for everything. We are more than willing to accept any feedback and contribution from you. Thank you very much and hope to see you in other webinars.
Thank you. Bye-bye.